No one noticed the tiny foal at first. That was the strange part. The auction yard was loud, boots scraping gravel, men shouting prices, horses snorting in fear behind rusted rails. Dust hung in the air like smoke from a forgotten fire. Buyers came for strength, speed, bloodlines. They came for power they could measure in muscle and pedigree. And in the middle of all that noise stood a foal so small and thin she looked like a shadow that had slipped free from the ground. She stood alone. Her ribs pressed sharply against her skin, each breath visible. Her legs trembled, not from fear alone, but from hunger, from days, maybe weeks, of barely surviving. Her coat was dull, matted, the color of storm clouds before rain. One ear twitched at every sudden sound. The other drooped slightly, as if even listening took too much effort. Most people didn't even look at her. And that's how she ended up with a starting price of 60 cents. At the far edge of the crowd stood Ethan Cole, a rancher who had learned long ago what it felt like to be invisible. His boots were worn thin at the soles. His jacket had been patched twice at the elbows. He wasn't here to buy a horse, he couldn't afford one. He was here because sometimes, when things get bad enough, you go places you shouldn't, just to remind yourself that hope still exists somewhere. Ethan had lost almost everything in 3 years. The drought came first. Then the bank notices. Then the quiet shame of selling land his family had worked for generations. He used to wake before sunrise to the sound of horses nickering in the pasture. Now he woke to silence, broken only by the creak of an empty barn door swinging in the wind. He told himself he was just watching the auction. But when his eyes landed on the foal, something tightened in his chest. She lifted her head slightly, just enough for him to see her eyes. They weren't wild. They weren't aggressive. They were tired. And underneath that exhaustion was something else, something stubborn. A flicker that said, "I'm still here." The auctioneer cleared his throat. Next lot. Female foal. No papers. No guarantees. Starting bid, 60 cents. A few men laughed. Someone muttered, "She won't last the winter." Another voice added, "Waste of hay." The gavel hovered. Ethan didn't move. He didn't plan to. 60 cents wasn't much, but when your bank account reads double digits, even that feels like a risk. He told himself to look away. He told himself this wasn't his problem. Then the foal took a step. Her leg buckled. She caught herself at the last second, hooves scraping the dirt. For a moment, she stood frozen, as if waiting for the world to punish her for not falling. No one moved to help. That's when Ethan raised his hand. The auctioneer blinked. 60 cents, we have 60 cents. Any other bids? Silence. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Sold. Just like that, the foal had an owner. And just like that, Ethan Cole made the decision that would either destroy him, or change his life forever. As the crowd dispersed, a man beside him shook his head. "You know what you just bought?" Ethan swallowed. "A horse." The man snorted. "No. You bought a problem." The foal flinched as someone opened the gate. She backed away, eyes wide now, fear finally breaking through exhaustion. Ethan stepped forward slowly, hands open, heart pounding harder than it had in years. "It's okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he meant her or himself. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But she didn't run either. That night, as Ethan loaded her into a borrowed trailer, rain began to fall. Cold, steady, relentless. By the time they reached his ranch, the sky had turned black. Lightning flashed over empty fields, briefly revealing fences that needed fixing, barns that needed repairs, dreams that felt too heavy to carry. He led her into the old stall, laying down the last of his good hay. She didn't eat right away. She stood there, watching him, measuring him. Ethan leaned against the stall door, exhaustion crashing over him. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted softly. "But if you're willing to fight, I'll fight too." The foal took one careful step forward. Then another. She lowered her head and began to eat. Ethan closed his eyes. He didn't know it yet, but that sound, the quiet rhythm of a starving foal finally feeding, was the first note of a story that would echo far beyond this broken ranch. By morning, the storm had passed, but the damage remained. Ethan woke before dawn, the way he always had, his body still trained by years of ranch life even when hope felt thin. The air inside the house was cold. He pulled on his jacket and stepped outside, boots crunching against wet gravel. The land stretched out in front of him, quiet and gray, fences leaning like tired men. His eyes went straight to the barn. The foal. For one terrifying second, he imagined finding her collapsed in the stall, another loss he couldn't afford, not financially, not emotionally. His pace quickened. He slid the barn door open, breath catching in his throat. She was standing. Barely, but standing. Her head lifted when she heard him. Those same dark eyes met his again, and something shifted between them. Not trust. Not yet. But recognition. "You made it through the night," Ethan whispered, relief flooding him so fast his knees felt weak. She flicked her ear toward him, then returned to the thin pile of hay, chewing slowly, deliberately. Ethan noticed how cautious she was, how every movement seemed calculated, as if energy were a currency she couldn't afford to waste. That was when he saw it. A roar wound along her shoulder, half hidden beneath dirt and tangled hair. Old. Untreated. Probably from being kicked or trapped somewhere she shouldn't have been. Guilt hit him hard. "All right," he murmured. "We'll take this one step at a time." He spent the morning doing what he could, cleaning the stall, bringing fresh water, mixing a careful mash the way his father once taught him for weak horses. He moved slowly, spoke softly. Every time he stepped too close, the foal stiffened, muscles tight as wire. She didn't trust hands. That told him more than words ever could. Days passed like that. Slow. Uneven. Some mornings she greeted him at the stall door. Other mornings she stayed in the far corner, watching him like a hawk watches a storm roll in. She startled at sudden noises. At shadows. At kindness. Ethan named her Luna. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way she seemed most alive at night, when the world grew quiet. Or maybe it was because the moon, like her, shone brightest after darkness. But not everyone thought Ethan's decision was noble. "You're throwing good time after bad," said Mark, a neighboring rancher, leaning against the fence one afternoon. "That foal's got no papers. No bloodline. Even if she lives, what then?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He watched Luna in the paddock, her steps still awkward but stronger than before. "Then she lives," he said finally. Mark shook his head. "You can't feed hope to a horse." "No," Ethan replied. "But you can feed a horse hope." Money became tight, tighter than ever. Vet visits weren't cheap. Supplements, grain, repairs to the old fencing, it all added up. Ethan took odd jobs where he could. Fixed tractors. Mended fences. Slept less. Worried more. There were nights he sat at the kitchen table staring at bills, wondering if he'd finally crossed the line from stubbornness into foolishness. And then there were nights he went to the barn. That was where Luna surprised him. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in orange and purple, Ethan sat on an overturned bucket, exhausted beyond words. Luna stood nearby, tail flicking lazily. For the first time since she arrived, she took a step toward him, unprompted. Then another. Ethan froze. She lowered her head slightly, nostrils flaring, breath warm against his sleeve. He didn't reach out. He didn't speak. He just let her decide. After a long moment, she touched her nose to his arm. The contact was brief. Almost accidental. But it felt like a promise. From that day on, Luna began to change. Her coat gained a faint shine. Her ribs, while still visible, softened. Her legs steadied. And with her physical strength came something else, a spark. She ran short bursts across the paddock, ears forward, menée lifting in the wind like she was remembering something she'd nearly forgotten. Freedom. Ethan noticed her gait then. The way her stride stretched. The natural balance. It wasn't something you trained, it was something you either had or didn't. And Luna had it. The first time she truly ran, Ethan forgot to breathe. "She's got something," he whispered to himself. But progress never comes without resistance. One afternoon, a sudden clap of thunder sent Luna bolting. She slammed into the fence, panic overtaking instinct. Ethan ran toward her without thinking. She reared, eyes wild, hooves striking the air. "Easy," he shouted, heart hammering. For a split second, he thought she might hurt him or herself. Then she stopped. Shaking. Frozen. Ethan stood a few feet away, hands raised, voice low. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Slowly, her breathing eased. Slowly, she lowered her head. That moment changed everything. She didn't just survive the fear, she learned she didn't have to face it alone. Weeks turned into months. Luna grew taller. Stronger. Her muscles developed with an elegance that caught more than one passerby's attention. People began to ask questions. "Where'd you get her? What breed is she? How old did you say she was?" Ethan always gave the same answer. "She's just Luna." But late at night, lying awake, doubts crept in. What if everyone else was right? What if this was as far as she'd go? He'd paid 60 cents for her. But the cost of believing in her was far higher. And yet, every time Luna met his eyes, calm and steady now, it felt like she was telling him the same thing. Don't stop. The first time someone else noticed, it happened by accident. Ethan had brought Luna to a small local fair, not to compete, not even to show her off. He needed the exposure. Someone had mentioned that smaller breeders sometimes looked for young horses with potential, even without papers. If he could sell her, even for a modest price, it might cover the debts that kept him awake at night. He didn't tell Luna that. She stepped off the trailer cautiously, ears flicking at the unfamiliar sounds, children laughing, metal gates clanging, the low murmur of crowds. But she didn't panic. She stayed close to Ethan, her shoulder brushing his leg now and then, grounding herself. That alone felt like a miracle. As they walked along the dirt path, Ethan felt it again, that strange pull in his chest. Luna's stride wasn't just smooth. It was deliberate. Balanced. Every step landed clean, like she knew exactly where her hooves belonged. A man near the fence stopped mid-sentence. "Hold on," he said. Ethan slowed, turning slightly. The man was older, weathered, with eyes that missed very little. He wore a simple jacket and carried himself like someone who'd spent a lifetime around horses, not just owning them, but listening to them. "Walk her again," the man said. Ethan hesitated. Then he nodded and turned Luna in a slow circle. The man leaned forward, squinting. "Again. Straighter this time." They walked. Luna's head bobbed softly, rhythm steady. The man let out a low whistle. "That foal," he said. "Where did you get her?" Ethan felt his pulse spike. "Auction." "How much?" Ethan swallowed. 60 cents. The man laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Then he stopped laughing. "No," he said slowly. "You didn't." Ethan shrugged. "She wasn't worth much to anyone else." The man straightened. "Son, do you know what a floating trot looks like?" Ethan frowned. "I know what good movement looks like." The man smiled faintly. "You're looking at it." His name was Caleb Ross, a retired trainer who'd worked with performance horses decades earlier. He didn't say much more that day. Just handed Ethan a card and said, "If you ever decide to train her seriously, call me." Ethan drove home with his heart pounding. That night, he couldn't sleep. What if Luna wasn't just surviving? What if she was special? Training began cautiously. Ethan couldn't afford a full program, so he did what he could: groundwork, gentle conditioning, short sessions that built confidence without pushing too hard. Luna resisted at first. Not aggressively, but emotionally. Some days she refused to move forward. Other days she spooked at nothing, old fears resurfacing without warning. And then there were days she seemed to read Ethan's thoughts before he acted. Those days scared him the most. Because they felt like hope. When Luna turned 2, Ethan called Caleb. The old trainer arrived one crisp morning, boots crunching frost. He watched silently as Ethan worked Luna in the round pen. He didn't interrupt. Didn't comment. Just observed. Finally, he nodded. "She's raw," Caleb said. "And she's been hurt. But the talent's there. Real talent." Ethan exhaled. "So what does that mean?" "It means," Caleb replied, "that if you do this right, she could be worth a lot of money." The words settled heavy in the air. Worth money. Ethan thought of the nights he'd gone without heat. The bills stacked on the counter. The land he'd already lost. And then he thought of Luna, the way she leaned into his touch now, the way she trusted him with her fear. What's the risk? Ethan asked. Caleb didn't hesitate. Push her too fast, and you'll break her. Body or mind. Or both. They agreed on a plan. Slow. Patient. Honest. Progress came in inches. Setbacks came in miles. The first saddle sent Luna into a panic. She bucked, twisted, eyes rolling. Ethan stopped immediately, heart racing. It took days just to reintroduce the pad without fear. Caleb watched closely. She remembers something, he said quietly. And it wasn't kind. That night, Ethan sat in the stall with Luna, back against the wall. He didn't try to train her. He just stayed. I won't let anyone hurt you, he whispered. She lowered herself to the ground beside him. It was the first time she'd ever lain down with him present. As months passed, Luna found her rhythm again. When she moved freely, heads turned. When she trained, she learned fast, too fast sometimes, like she was afraid of being left behind. Word began to spread. A young woman named Mara, a local rider with quiet confidence, came to watch one afternoon. She studied Luna carefully. She's different, Mara said. She listens. Ethan nodded. She always has. Mara swung into the saddle weeks later, light as air. Luna tensed, then softened. They moved together like they'd known each other longer than they had. Caleb smiled. That, he said, is rare. But just when everything seemed to be falling into place, disaster struck. During a routine training session, Luna stumbled. A sharp cry escaped her. She went down hard, dust exploding around her. Ethan ran. Luna struggled to rise, favoring her leg. Caleb's face went pale. Get the vet, he said. Now. As Ethan held Luna's head, panic clawed at his chest. All the progress. All the hope. For the first time since that auction, the fear returned in full force. Because this time, losing Luna wouldn't just break his heart. It would end everything. The vet arrived just before sunset. By then, the dust had settled, but the fear hadn't. Luna stood trembling in the center of the paddock, weight shifted awkwardly off her front leg. Every breath she took seemed measured, cautious, as if moving too much might shatter something inside her. Ethan stayed at her head, one hand pressed against her neck, feeling her pulse race beneath his palm. I'm here, he murmured again and again. The vet, an older woman named Dr. Helen Price, calm and precise, ran her hands down Luna's leg, eyes sharp, movements deliberate. Luna flinched but didn't pull away. Trust, hard-earned, held. Finally, Dr. Price stepped back. No fracture, she said. Ethan's knees nearly gave out. But, she continued, raising a finger, there's tendon strain. And judging by her reaction, this isn't the first injury she's had. Caleb crossed his arms. Can she recover? Yes, the vet replied. If you stop everything. No riding. No training. Months of rest. Careful rehab. Months. The word echoed like a sentence. After the vet left, silence filled the barn. Luna was led carefully back to her stall, her steps slow, uneven. Ethan sat outside on a bale of hay long after dark, staring at the ground. This might be it, he said quietly. Caleb didn't argue. He just said, talent doesn't mean much if the horse never gets a chance to heal. The next few weeks were the hardest yet. No progress. No milestones. Just patience. Ethan wrapped Luna's leg daily. Walked her slowly. Spoke to her constantly. Some days she seemed frustrated, energy trapped in a body forced to be still. Other days she leaned into him, exhausted, trusting him to know what she couldn't. The money ran out. Ethan sold his truck. Then his last piece of unused equipment. Friends offered advice. Some offered pity. A few offered to buy Luna as is, for a fraction of what she might be worth one day. He said no to all of them. One night, as winter pressed in, Ethan sat in the barn wrapped in an old blanket. Snow whispered against the roof. Luna shifted in her stall, then did something unexpected. She stepped closer. Lowered her head. rested it gently against his shoulder. Ethan froze. He'd trained horses all his life, but this wasn't training. This was something else. Something chosen. Tears slipped down his face before he realized he was crying. "I've got you," he whispered. "No matter what." Spring came slowly. With it, Luna's strength returned. Her walk steadied. The stiffness eased. Dr. Price smiled during her follow-up exam. "She's healing well," she said. "Better than expected." Training resumed, carefully. Every step forward felt earned. Every success tasted sweeter for the struggle that came before. Then came the call. A regional showcase was opening, small but respected. Horses without papers were allowed if their performance spoke for itself. Caleb looked at Ethan. "This is your shot." Mara agreed to ride Luna. The night before the event, Ethan barely slept. He kept seeing that fall. Hearing the thud. Feeling the fear all over again. At the arena, Luna stepped into the ring, and the world seemed to hold its breath. She moved like water. Every stride was controlled power. Every turn effortless. The crowd fell quiet, then leaned forward. Judges exchanged glances. Mara dismounted to applause. One judge approached Ethan afterward. "That horse," he said slowly, "where did she come from?" Ethan smiled, barely. "She was almost nothing." The offers came fast. Then faster. Numbers Ethan had never seen attached to his name. But the biggest surprise came weeks later. A prominent investor, someone who'd watched the footage online, made an offer not just for Luna, but for a breeding and training partnership. They believed Luna's lineage could be traced through performance traits, not papers. The number made Ethan dizzy. It would change everything. Yet when Ethan went to the barn that night, he hesitated. Selling Luna felt like breaking a promise. She watched him from her stall, calm, trusting. He rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know what the right choice is," he whispered. Luna breathed out softly, steady and warm. In that moment, Ethan realized something. This story had never been about money. The money was just the proof. The offer sat on Ethan's kitchen table for 3 days. He didn't touch it. The papers were thick, formal, filled with language that felt heavier than the numbers printed inside. A partnership. Breeding rights. Training facilities. A future that promised security instead of survival. A future worth more than $1 million. Any other version of Ethan Cole, any version before Luna, would have signed immediately. But this version walked out to the barn every morning instead. Luna was waiting. She always was. Her coat now gleamed in the sunlight, dark and smooth, a far cry from the dull, starving foal that once stood trembling in an auction yard. Her eyes were clear. Curious. Steady. When Ethan approached, she lifted her head and stepped forward without hesitation. No fear. No doubt. Just trust. Ethan rested his hand against her neck, feeling the quiet strength beneath the skin. "We did all right," he said softly. Luna flicked an ear, as if agreeing. That night, Ethan made his decision. He signed, but on his terms. The partnership allowed Luna to compete, to breed, to be seen by the world, but she would always have a home with him. No rushing. No exploitation. No breaking the promise he'd made on the cold night she first ate from his last bale of hay. When the announcement went public, the story spread fast. Headlines didn't talk about pedigrees or genetics. They talked about a 6-cent foal. A struggling rancher. A gamble no one believed in. People shared the video of Luna's performance millions of times. Comments poured in, from horse lovers, from people who'd never touched a rein in their lives. This gave me hope. I needed this story today. Thank you for not giving up on her. Ethan read them late at night, sitting at the same kitchen table where bills used to pile up. The ranch changed. Fences were repaired. Pastures came back to life. The barn was rebuilt, but Ethan kept one stall exactly the same, weathered boards and all. A reminder of where it started. Mara went on to ride Luna at larger events. Each time, the applause grew louder. Each time, Ethan stood quietly at the edge of the ring, hands in his pockets, heart full. Caleb watched from the sidelines one afternoon and chuckled. "You know," he said, Most people look for value in the wrong places. Ethan smiled. So did I. Luna's first foal arrived one spring morning, strong and bright-eyed. As Ethan watched the new life stand on unsteady legs, he felt the circle close. 60 cents. That was all it took to change everything. Not because it was cheap, but because it was faith. Ethan leaned against the fence, Luna grazing nearby, her presence calm and grounding as ever. He thought about the man he used to be, the one drowning in loss, convinced the world had passed him by. He wasn't invisible anymore. But more importantly, neither was she. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold, Ethan reached out and Luna stepped closer, just as she always had. Some stories end with wealth. This one began with it, but measured in something else. Trust. Patience. Love.